In a small, gritty city where crime thrived like weeds in an untended garden, two police officers, Detective Marcus Hale and his partner, Officer Ryan Vega, ruled with iron fists cloaked in badges. They weren't your typical law enforcement duo who chased criminals or protected the innocent. Instead, they were wolves in sheep's clothing, men who used their positions of power to line their pockets and crush anyone who dared stand in their way. The city had long been drowning in corruption. Small business owners paid protection fees just to keep their shops open without being raided on false charges. Families lived in fear that one wrong move could land them behind bars for crimes they didn't commit, and if drugs disappeared from evidence lockers only to reappear on street corners, well, no one asked questions because asking meant trouble, and trouble came swiftly when Hale and Vega were involved. But even the darkest storms have moments of calm before they're blown apart. This particular storm began brewing when Elena Morales walked into the local courthouse clutching a stack of papers. To most people, she looked like any other citizen, a young woman wearing simple clothes, her dark hair tied back neatly, her eyes sharp yet tired from years of fighting battles. Others couldn't see. What no one realized was that beneath her calm exterior lay a mind sharper than any blade, and a plan so meticulously crafted it would shake the very foundations of the city. Elena wasn't just another victim seeking justice. Her brother, Javier, had been thrown into prison after Hale and Vega planted fake evidence linking him to a robbery he hadn't committed. The arrest devastated their family. Javier lost his job, his freedom, and nearly his life during a violent altercation inside the overcrowded jail. For months, Elena fought alone, filing complaints, gathering documents, and pleading with anyone who might listen. But every door she knocked on seemed sealed shut, guarded by the same system that empowered men like Hale and Vega. That's when fate, or perhaps careful planning, intervened. Elena caught the attention of someone higher up, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. At first, agents approached her cautiously, unsure whether she was trustworthy or simply desperate. But as they dug deeper into her story, they uncovered layers of corruption far worse than anyone anticipated. It wasn't just Hale and Vega. It was an entire network of dirty cops, shady lawyers, and compromised judges all working together to maintain control over the city. Recognizing Elena's determination and intelligence, the FBI offered her a deal. She couldn't refuse. Become part of their operation. They trained her, equipped her with resources, and gave her a new identity as a private citizen pursuing justice for her brother. Unbeknownst to everyone, including the defense attorneys and prosecutors in the upcoming trial, Elena wasn't just playing the role of a grieving sister. She was Special Agent Elena Morales, handpicked by the FBI to dismantle this web of corruption once and for all. As the trial date approached, tension filled the air. Flyers advertising the case appeared around town, sparking whispers among residents. Some hoped the trial would finally bring accountability, while others feared retaliation if Hale and Vega walked free. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Reporters scribbled notes furiously, cameras clicked incessantly, and spectators packed the benches, eager to witness what many believed would be yet another miscarriage of justice. Hale and Vega strolled in confidently, their polished shoes clicking against the tiled floor. They exchanged smirks with fellow officers seated nearby, their body language screaming arrogance. To them, this trial was nothing more than a formality, a chance to flex their influence and remind everyone why they were untouchable. After all, hadn't they always come out on top? Hadn't they built their careers on bending rules and silencing dissenters? What they didn't know, and what made Elena's presence all the more thrilling, was that she held the ace card. While they preened under the spotlight, oblivious to the trap closing in around them, Elena sat quietly at the plaintiff's table, her fingers tracing the edge of a notebook. Every word spoken, every piece of evidence presented, brought her closer to the moment she'd reveal the truth, not just about their crimes, but about herself. Outside the courthouse, life went on as usual. Cars honked impatiently at traffic lights, children played on sidewalks, and shopkeepers swept dust off their stoops. Yet within those four walls, the stage was set for a showdown unlike anything the city had ever seen. Little did Hale and Vega know, Their reign of terror was about to meet its match in the form of a seemingly ordinary woman with extraordinary resolve. Elena Morales wasn't someone who relied on luck. She was methodical, patient, and brilliant at reading people, qualities that made her a perfect fit for the FBI's undercover operations. But this mission wasn't just another assignment. It was deeply personal. Every late night spent poring over case files, every whispered conversation with informants, every tear shed in private had led her to this moment. Her brother Javier's face haunted her thoughts, a constant reminder of why she couldn't afford to fail. Behind the scenes, Elena worked tirelessly alongside a team of skilled agents who operated in the shadows. These weren't your typical cops or investigators. They were specialists trained to blend into the background while pulling strings no one else could see. Together, they pieced together a puzzle far more intricate than anyone initially imagined. The corruption went beyond Hale and Vega. It stretched across departments, courtrooms, and even City Hall. It was a machine built to protect itself, designed to crush dissenters and reward loyalty. And Elena? She was about to throw a wrench into its gears. Her strategy was simple but risky. Infiltrate the system from the inside by posing as an ordinary citizen seeking justice for her brother. This required her to suppress her instincts as a federal agent and play the role of a vulnerable, heartbroken sister. It meant swallowing insults hurled at her during pretrial hearings and enduring condescending smirks from defense attorneys, who dismissed her as naive. But beneath her composed exterior, Elena burned with quiet determination. Each insult fueled her resolve. Each smirk sharpened her focus. To gather evidence, Elena leaned heavily on her network of undercover operatives. Some posed as witnesses willing to testify against Hale and Vega. Others pretended to be disgruntled former officers eager to spill secrets. One particularly brave informant, a retired detective named Walter Crane, provided critical information about how Hale and Vega laundered money through shell companies. Another source, a young street vendor named Maria, recorded incriminating conversations between corrupt cops and drug dealers using a hidden microphone tucked inside her scarf. The challenge lay not only in collecting evidence but also in protecting those who helped her. Every time Elena met with an informant, she ran the risk of exposing them to danger. Hale and Vega weren't above silencing loose ends permanently, and their reach extended further than anyone realized. To keep her sources safe, Elena coordinated elaborate measures, safe houses, encrypted communication devices, and decoy meetings designed to mislead anyone watching. As the trial approached, Elena faced another hurdle, maintaining her cover. While the rest of her team worked behind the scenes, she was the public face of the operation. Any slip-up, any hint of her true identity, could jeopardize everything. So she rehearsed her story until it felt natural, memorizing details about her life as a struggling office worker trying to clear her brother's name. She practiced crying on command, forcing herself to relive painful memories of Javier's arrest to make her emotions appear genuine. Despite the immense pressure, there were moments when Elena allowed herself to feel hope. Late at night, sitting alone in her modest hotel room, she reviewed the growing mountain of evidence against Hale and Vega. Surveillance photos showed them meeting with known criminals. Bank statements revealed suspicious deposits linked to illegal activities. Audio recordings captured their boasts about evading accountability. With each new discovery, Elena's confidence grew. These men thought they were untouchable, but soon they'd learn otherwise. Yet even as victory seemed within reach, Elena knew better than to underestimate her opponents. Hale and Vega weren't amateurs. They'd spent years perfecting their craft. They manipulated evidence, bribed officials, and intimidated witnesses with chilling efficiency. Their arrogance bordered on invincibility, or so they believed. Elena understood that defeating them wouldn't just require proof. It would demand timing, precision, and an element of surprise. One evening, as she prepared for bed, Elena received a call from Agent Carter, her handler on the case. His voice crackled through the phone, urgent but controlled. "We've got something big," he said. "Something that ties them directly to multiple murders. You ready for this?" Elena hesitated for a split second before responding. "I've been ready for years." Hanging up, she stared out the window at the city skyline, its lights twinkling like stars trapped in a stormy sky. Tomorrow, she'd step back into that courtroom, pretending to be nothing more than a grieving sister, fighting for justice. But inside, she carried the weight of an entire investigation and the power to bring down two of the most dangerous men in the city. For now, though, she let herself savor the anticipation. The game was almost over, and when the final move came, Hale and Vega wouldn't know what hit them. The courtroom was a battlefield, though it didn't look like one at first glance. The polished wooden benches, the heavy oak podium, and the stern-faced judge all gave the illusion of order and fairness. But beneath the surface, invisible currents of tension swirled. Elena Morales sat at the plaintiff's table, her posture calm but her mind racing. Across the aisle, Detective Marcus Hale leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, radiating arrogance. Officer Ryan Vega mirrored his partner's confidence, occasionally whispering jokes to their defense attorney, who smirked as if they already knew the outcome. It was the day of cross-examination, and Hale had taken the stand. His testimony was a masterclass in manipulation, calculated lies wrapped in charm, delivered with just enough emotion to sway the jury. He spoke about his dedication to protecting the community, his voice dripping with sincerity. When asked about Javier Morales' arrest, he claimed it was an open and shut case. "We followed every lead," he said, meeting Elena's gaze without flinching. "Sometimes justice isn't pretty, but it's necessary." Elena felt her stomach tighten. She wanted to shout, to expose him right then and there. But she couldn't. Not yet. Instead, she let her lawyer handle the questioning. Her attorney, a seasoned prosecutor named Linda Reyes, methodically dismantled Hale's story, pointing out inconsistencies in his timeline and highlighting missing evidence. Yet, no matter how many holes Reyes poked in his narrative, Hale remained unshaken. At one point, he even turned toward the jury and shrugged as if to say, "What can you do?" When it was Elena's turn to speak, Hale's demeanor shifted slightly. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the witness stand, his eyes narrowing as if sizing her up. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he said, his tone mocking. "Coming here, trying to play the victim. Newsflash, you're brothers, guilty, lady, and nothing you say will change that." Elena didn't flinch. She kept her expression neutral, letting his words hang in the air like smoke. "Is that so?" she replied softly, her voice steady. "Then why did you plant evidence against him?" The courtroom erupted into murmurs. The judge banged his gavel, demanding silence, but Hale's smirk only widened. "Plant evidence?" he repeated, feigning shock. "That's quite an accusation. You got proof of that?" For a moment, Elena considered revealing everything: the FBI operation, the months of investigation, the damning evidence waiting in the wings. But she stopped herself. This wasn't the time. Let him bask in his false sense of security, she thought. Let him believe he's untouchable. Because soon, very soon, the floor would drop out from under him. Later that evening, Elena returned to her hotel room, exhausted but alert. Agent Carter was already waiting for her, pacing near the window. On the bed lay a laptop connected to a live surveillance feed, showing Hale and Vega celebrating at a local bar. They were surrounded by colleagues, laughing loudly, clinking glasses filled with amber liquid. Someone raised a toast. To another win. The camera zoomed in on Hale's face, his grin wide and self-assured. "They really think they've won," Carter muttered, shaking his head. "Arrogance is going to be their downfall." Elena nodded, watching the screen intently. Despite their bravado, something about their celebration struck her as odd. It wasn't just confidence, it was recklessness. These men weren't merely celebrating, they were taunting fate, daring it to challenge them. And fate, thanks to Elena and her team, was about to oblige. Carter handed her a folder containing new evidence linking Hale and Vega to multiple unsolved murders. The files included photographs, timestamps, and detailed accounts from informants who had witnessed their involvement in violent crimes. One document stood out, a handwritten note, allegedly penned by Hale himself, outlining plans to eliminate a key witness in a drug trafficking case. The note had been recovered during a raid on a safe house earlier that week. "This is it," Carter said, his voice low but charged with excitement. "This seals the deal. Once we present this in court, there's no way they'll walk away." Elena flipped through the pages, her heart pounding. She'd waited so long for this moment, dreamed of it countless times. But now that it was here, she felt a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. Bringing down Hale and Vega meant more than just winning a case. It meant dismantling a system built on fear and corruption. It meant proving to the world, and to herself, that justice could still prevail, even in the darkest corners. As she closed the folder, Elena glanced at the surveillance feed again. Hale and Vega were oblivious to the storm brewing around them, oblivious to the fact that their empire was crumbling brick by brick. Tomorrow, when the trial resumed, she'd make sure they understood exactly what was coming. But for now, she allowed herself a small smile. Victory was close enough to taste. The night before the verdict, Detective Marcus Hale and Officer Ryan Vega threw a party that could only be described as triumphant. Held at an exclusive downtown club with dim lighting and velvet ropes guarding the entrance, the celebration was less about subtlety and more about flaunting their perceived invincibility. The guest list included fellow officers, defense attorneys, and even a few jurors who had mysteriously been invited despite court rules forbidding contact with participants during the trial. Champagne flowed freely, laughter echoed through the room, and cigars burned like torches in the smoky air. Hale stood at the center of it all, basking in the glow of admiration. Or perhaps it was fear disguised as respect. He raised his glass high, his voice booming over the music. "To justice," he declared, sarcasm dripping from every word. "And to those who know how to play the game." Cheers erupted around him, but Vega, seated nearby with a cigar dangling from his lips, leaned closer to whisper something in his ear. Both men laughed, their faces flushed with alcohol and hubris. Meanwhile, hidden cameras placed strategically by undercover FBI agents captured every moment of the celebration. These weren't just for show, they were part of Elena Morales' master plan. From her hotel room, Elena watched the live feed alongside Agent Carter and two other members of her team. On the screen, Hale toasted again, this time pointing directly at the camera, a gesture meant to intimidate any potential snoops. But instead of feeling threatened, Elena felt a surge of satisfaction. Let them celebrate, she thought. By tomorrow, they'll wish they'd stayed sober. "This is perfect," Agent Carter said, leaning back in his chair. "They're practically handing us their confession on a silver platter." Elena nodded, her eyes never leaving the screen. She noticed how some guests exchanged nervous glances while others seemed uneasy about being filmed. A few slipped out, quietly, likely realizing the optics of attending such a blatant display of arrogance. Still, most stayed, lulled into complacency by Hale and Vega's bravado. It was a mistake, one they'd regret deeply. Back at the club, the mood shifted slightly when someone brought up the upcoming verdict. "What if the jury doesn't go our way?" one officer asked hesitantly, his voice barely audible above the din. Hale waved him off dismissively. "Don't worry about it," he said, his tone dripping with certainty. "We've got everything under control. Trust me, these people don't have the guts to stand against us." Vega chimed in, swirling his drink lazily. "Besides, even if they try something stupid, we'll handle it. That's what we do best." His words hung heavy in the air, a chilling reminder of the lengths they'd gone to silence opposition in the past. For Elena, watching from afar, it was proof of exactly what she'd suspected all along. These men weren't just corrupt cops, they were predators who thrived on power and intimidation. As the hours ticked by, the party grew louder and more reckless. At one point, Hale grabbed the microphone from the DJ booth and began singing off-key, earning roars of laughter from the crowd. Vega joined him, playfully shoving him aside to belt out another verse. To anyone else, it might have looked like harmless fun. But to Elena, it was a portrait of unchecked arrogance, a dangerous cocktail of confidence and carelessness that would soon lead to their undoing. By midnight, Elena decided it was time to call it a night. She turned off the surveillance feed and stretched, her body stiff from hours of sitting still. Agent Carter lingered behind, reviewing notes and double-checking logistics for the next day. "You should get some rest," he advised gently. "Tomorrow's going to be a big day." "I don't need rest," Elena replied, though she knew he was right. What she needed was clarity, and maybe a moment to reflect on how far she'd come. She stepped onto the balcony of her hotel room, letting the cool night breeze wash over her. Below, the city buzzed with life, its streets illuminated by neon lights and headlights streaming endlessly forward. Somewhere out there, Hale and Vega were still celebrating, oblivious to the storm gathering strength above them. For months, Elena had played the role of the grieving sister, bottling up her anger and pain to maintain her cover. Now, standing, alone under the stars, she allowed herself to feel it all. The frustration, the heartbreak, the determination. Javier's face flashed in her mind, his smile replaced by the haunted look he wore after months in prison. This wasn't just about bringing down 2 corrupt officers anymore. It was about restoring dignity to everyone they'd hurt, including her family. As dawn approached, Elena returned inside to prepare for the final act. She reviewed the evidence one last time, ensuring every detail was ready to present in court. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the final day of the trial arrived. Spectators filled every seat, reporters jostled for position near the front, and cameras clicked incessantly, capturing the tense atmosphere. Elena Morales walked in, with her head held high, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit that exuded authority. She carried a slim folder containing the evidence that would change everything. Her calm demeanor masked the storm brewing inside her. This was the moment she'd been preparing for, the culmination of months of sacrifice and strategy. Detective Marcus Hale and Officer Ryan Vega entered shortly after, their expressions smug and confident. They wore expensive suits clearly chosen to project power and dominance. As they took their seats, Hale leaned over to whisper something to his defense attorney, who nodded approvingly. Vega smirked at Elena, his eyes gleaming with mockery as if daring her to try one last desperate move. Neither man seemed remotely concerned about the verdict. They believed they had already won. The judge entered, calling the room to order, with a firm rap of his gavel. The jury filed in next, their faces unreadable masks. Elena studied them carefully, searching for any hint of what was coming. Then, the foreman stood up, clutching a slip of paper that felt heavier than it looked. The room fell silent, so quiet you could hear the faint rustle of papers or the shuffle of shoes against the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," the foreman began, his voice steady but tinged with gravity. "On the charges presented against Detective Marcus Hale and Officer Ryan Vega." He paused, glancing briefly at the defendants before continuing. "We find them guilty on all counts." The words hit like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, followed by murmurs of disbelief. Reporters scrambled to document the historic moment, while spectators erupted into whispers, some clapping softly despite the judge's stern glare. For Hale and Vega, however, time seemed to freeze. Their smirks vanished instantly, replaced by looks of pure shock. Hale's face turned pale, his jaw dropping slightly as he stared at the jury in stunned silence. Vega blinked rapidly as though trying to process what he'd just heard. Before either man could fully grasp what was happening, Elena stood up, signaling 2 federal marshals stationed near the doors. They moved swiftly and silently, stepping forward with handcuffs ready. Elena stepped toward the defendant's table, her presence commanding attention. Every eye in the room turned to her, curiosity mixing with awe. "Detective Hale, Officer Vega," she said, her voice clear and unwavering, cutting through the chaos like a knife. "You are under arrest for multiple counts of corruption, conspiracy, murder, and obstruction of justice." Hale's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. What is this?" he stammered, his voice trembling. "Who are you?" Elena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she locked eyes with him, letting the weight of her gaze sink in. Then, slowly, deliberately, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a badge. The golden shield of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Holding it aloft for everyone to see, she announced, "My name is Elena Morales, and I am the acting director of the FBI." The courtroom exploded into chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed wildly, and spectators erupted into astonished chatter. Hale and Vega sat frozen in their seats, their arrogance shattered like glass. Vega buried his face in his hands, muttering curses under his breath, while Hale shot daggers at Elena with his eyes, his earlier bravado completely gone. As the federal marshals approached, Elena addressed the court once more. "For years you've abused your power, destroyed lives, and operated above the law. But today justice has caught up with you." Her words rang out like a declaration, silencing the room momentarily. "This isn't just about you, it's about everyone you've hurt, everyone you've betrayed. And now the truth will come out." Hale struggled weakly as the marshals placed him in handcuffs, his protests drowned out by the commotion. Vega didn't resist. His shoulders slumped in defeat as he was led away. The sight of these once feared men being escorted out of the courtroom, like common criminals, sent a ripple of satisfaction through the crowd. Some clapped quietly, others wiped away tears of relief, and a few whispered prayers of gratitude. Outside the courthouse, news vans lined the streets, broadcasting live updates to a captivated audience. Journalists shouted questions at anyone leaving the building, desperate for details. Inside, Elena remained composed, watching as the scene unfolded. She knew this was only the beginning. The arrests were a victory, but the fight against systemic corruption would continue long after today. Agent Carter approached her, his expression a mix of pride and admiration. "You did it," he said simply. "They never saw it coming." Elena nodded, allowing herself a small, fleeting smile. "No, they didn't," she replied. "But this isn't about me. It's about proving that no one is untouchable, not even those who wear badges." As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, Elena glanced around the courtroom one last time. The tables had turned, the scales of justice finally balanced. Tomorrow, headlines would scream her name, and the nation would learn about the woman who dismantled an empire of corruption. But for now, she savored the quiet triumph. A reminder that courage, persistence, and truth could overcome even the darkest forces. The revelation that Elena Morales was the acting director of the FBI sent shockwaves far beyond the courtroom. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, their headlines screaming phrases like, "Undercover FBI chief takes down corrupt cops," and "Justice served, the woman who outsmarted a criminal empire." Social media erupted with reactions, some praising Elena as a hero, others expressing disbelief that such widespread corruption had gone unchecked for so long. Within hours, her name became synonymous with integrity and resilience. For Detective Marcus Hale and Officer Ryan Vega, however, the nightmare was only beginning. As they were led out of the courthouse in handcuffs, reporters shouted questions, their cameras flashing like strobe lights. "How does it feel to be arrested by the FBI director herself?" one journalist yelled. Hale glared at the crowd, his face red with anger and humiliation, while Vega kept his head down, avoiding eye contact altogether. Gone were their days of strutting through the city like untouchable kings. Now they were pariahs, symbols of everything wrong with unchecked power. Back inside the courtroom, Elena addressed the judge and jury, thanking them for their courage in delivering a fair verdict despite immense pressure. She also acknowledged the bravery of the whistleblowers and informants who had risked their lives to expose the truth. "This case proves that when we stand together against injustice, no amount of corruption can withstand the light of transparency," she said, her voice firm but compassionate. Her words resonated deeply, earning nods of approval from those present. Once the formalities concluded, Elena stepped outside to face the media frenzy waiting for her. Flanked by Agent Carter and 2 federal marshals, she stood confidently on the courthouse steps, her badge gleaming under the bright sun. Reporters fired questions rapid fire, their voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony. "Director Morales, how did you manage to keep your identity hidden? What's next for the investigation?" Do you think this will lead to reforms in law enforcement? Elena raised a hand, signaling for silence. When the noise subsided, she spoke directly into the microphones. Today marks the start of accountability, not just for these individuals, but for systems that allow corruption to thrive. My team and I are committed to rooting out misconduct wherever it exists, ensuring that justice is not a privilege but a right for all citizens. Her statement drew applause from the crowd gathered outside the courthouse. Among them were families who had suffered at the hands of Hale and Vega, some holding pictures of loved ones wrongfully imprisoned or killed. One woman approached Elena, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching Elena's hand. "You gave us our voices back." Elena nodded, her own eyes glistening with emotion. In that moment, she felt the weight of her responsibilities, but also the profound impact of what she had accomplished. In the weeks that followed, Elena oversaw a sweeping investigation into the city's police department. Dozens of officers were questioned, and several high-ranking officials resigned amid allegations of involvement in illegal activities. The FBI worked closely with local authorities to implement reforms aimed at restoring trust between law enforcement and the community. Body cameras became mandatory, internal affairs divisions were strengthened, and independent oversight committees were established to monitor police conduct. Javier Morales, Elena's brother, was released from prison shortly after the trial. His reunion with Elena was bittersweet. He hugged her tightly, both crying and laughing as they walked out of the correctional facility together. Though Javier bore scars from his time behind bars, he vowed to help others who had been wrongfully convicted. Inspired by Elena's fight for justice, he began volunteering with organizations dedicated to reforming the criminal justice system. Meanwhile, Hale and Vega awaited sentencing in a maximum security facility, their once glamorous lives reduced to orange jumpsuits and cold concrete walls. During hearings, prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence tying them to multiple murders, drug trafficking operations, and countless acts of extortion. Witnesses testified about how months after the trial, the city began to heal. The streets that had once been ruled by fear and intimidation slowly transformed into spaces where people felt safe again. Business owners no longer handed over envelopes of cash to avoid trouble, and parents let their children play outside without worrying about stray bullets or drug deals happening nearby. It wasn't an overnight change. Years of damage couldn't be undone so quickly. But the seeds of hope were planted, nurtured by the courage of those who refused to stay silent. Elena Morales' name became a beacon of inspiration far beyond the small city where she'd dismantled Hale and Vega's empire. Her story spread across the nation, sparking conversations about accountability in law enforcement and systemic corruption. News programs invited experts to discuss how her operation could serve as a blueprint for rooting out misconduct elsewhere. Community leaders held rallies calling for similar investigations in their own towns, holding up Elena as proof that even the most entrenched systems of abuse could crumble under the weight of truth and determination. In Washington, D.C., Elena continued to push for reforms within the FBI and other federal agencies. She spearheaded initiatives aimed at training agents to identify signs of corruption early, ensuring that cases like Hale and Vega's wouldn't go unnoticed in the future. She also advocated for stronger protections for whistleblowers, recognizing the critical role they played in exposing wrongdoing. "The brave men and women who come forward are the unsung heroes of justice," she said during a press conference. "We owe them our support and our gratitude." Her efforts didn't stop there. Elena traveled across the country speaking at conferences, universities, and community centers. She shared her experiences openly, not just to celebrate her victories, but to remind people of the hard work still ahead. "Justice isn't something you achieve and then walk away from," she told one audience. "It's a constant battle, requiring vigilance and commitment. But if we stand together, there's nothing we can't overcome." Back in the city where it all began, tangible changes took shape. The police department underwent a massive overhaul, with new leadership committed to transparency and ethical practices. Officers attended workshops on de-escalation techniques and cultural sensitivity, learning to view themselves as protectors rather than enforcers. Citizens formed advisory boards to foster dialogue between law enforcement and the communities they served. Slowly but surely, trust began to rebuild, a fragile yet hopeful foundation for the future. For Javier Morales, Elena's brother, life took on new meaning. After his release from prison, he threw himself into advocacy work, partnering with organizations dedicated to helping wrongfully convicted individuals clear their names. He often spoke alongside Elena at events, recounting his ordeal and urging others to remain steadfast in the face of injustice. "My sister taught me that even when things seem impossible, you have to keep fighting," he said during one speech, "because sometimes the smallest spark can start the biggest fire." Hale and Vega, meanwhile, faded into obscurity behind bars. Their names became cautionary tales whispered in police academies and courtrooms alike. Once feared and untouchable, they were now symbols of hubris and greed, examples of what happens when power is abused without consequence. Prison guards reported that both men spent most of their time alone, shunned even by fellow inmates who despised their crimes against the community. As time passed, Elena reflected on everything she'd endured to bring this chapter to a close. There were moments when the weight of responsibility felt unbearable, when the sacrifices demanded too much. Yet through it all, she never lost sight of why she started: to give a voice to the voiceless, to hold the powerful accountable, and to prove that justice was possible, even in the darkest corners. One evening, as she sat on the porch of her modest home in D.C., Elena watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, and the distant hum of the city provided a soothing backdrop. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel a sense of peace. Not because the fight was over, but because she knew she'd made a difference. Her phone buzzed beside her, pulling her back to reality. It was a message from Agent Carter, updating her on another case brewing in a different part of the country. Corruption reared its ugly head everywhere, after all. But as Elena read the details, she smiled faintly. This was her life's work, not chasing glory or recognition, but standing firm against forces that sought to exploit and oppress. "Bring it on," she murmured softly, closing her eyes for a moment before heading back inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight she rested, knowing that somewhere out there, someone slept a little easier because of what she and countless others had done. And perhaps that was enough.